Just um, I want to just I mean before we dive into my needs, I want to get a assess update on what your world looks like. What are you working on? What are your priorities?
Open source. Um, but yeah, so I'm now part-time involved with association which is registered in Belgium. The name is Open Source Europe, which is pretty straightforward. And it's like Open Collective Foundation, which, for example, Async API is hosted at,
Yeah,
but Open Collective Foundation is US based, and Open Source Europe is purely Europe based to address the needs of Europe, basically.
yeah,
There's a
yeah.
lot of projects that don't want to be hosted by entities that are registered in US. Don't know why.
Did we do
Uh,
something to did we do something to upset you all? What?
I'm I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I'm not following news, so I'm surprised. But yeah, that's how it is. And basically, like you know me, so I was always in open source. So I do some AI shit for my contractor on the halftime, but basically slowly hope that in next months I'm gonna be full time on open source Europe. Because the thing is that
Nice.
it's now just a like a fiscal host like Open Collective Europe, Open Collective, Open Source Collective from US. But the thing is that I want to do more because our experience with Async API being hosted by Open Source Collective from US was that they are just doing like accounting basically,
Mm,
making sure that we can do expenses, etc. But they weren't using their network of collectives. Like knowledge sharing, I don't know, community building, etc. Like that was kind of missing for us. So that's what I want to change here, like provide more services and actually organize events and like bring people together, because there's a lot of cool projects on open source Europe
yeah,
with a lot of knowledge that should be shared among them. So yeah, that's the
yeah.
goal.
Nice. Well, that's good to hear. That's I would say that kind of speaks to a lot of what I'm concerned with and working on. I mean, first and foremost, I'm just focusing on API Evangelist in my APIs.io search engine right now. But my APIs.io search engine and the API Evangelist work is all built on APIs JSON and which is my spec, which I then lint at scale, not the open APIs, the async APIs, the JSON schemas, but also JSON LD and many other artifacts that I index as part of my search engine using Spectral. And so Spectral has been increasingly important to me as a linting tool, a flexible rules-based linting tool to make sure that the quality bar is at least acceptable levels across scale. Because I have hundreds of thousands of artifacts now, and I need a way to kind of make sense of it. I'm not linting governance in the sense of like a API producer as part of their design process. They have their rule set. I'm using it as a more generalized linting engine, but still a lot of the same reasons why you would lint for an enterprise. But with that said, I mean I've pushed forward Spectral for a number of years and been an open advocate. I built it into Postman. I used it at Bloomberg when I left Postman. And similar for reasons why I brought y'all async API in to Postman was to kind of avoid the smart bear private equity machine gobbling up, important standards that mean a lot to us. And Spectral is in that now. Spectral's in that state where it's just a config file for stoplight CLI, but it's widely used as a standard, and I want to elevate it as such. And so I was just assessing my own needs, and I was going to fork it and kind of build my own tools. And I'm like, this seems very selfish. I should talk to other people who are doing it. And then everybody I talked to is doing their own selfish thing. IBM, SAP, a couple others. Well, we forked it and we're using it. we don't trust Smart Bear. And I'm like, man, this is just bad news. Like we're all being selfish. Why don't we elevate it? And then my friends at the Dutch government contacted me, told me when I was in Amsterdam, and said, "Hey, we're really concerned. There's a pipeline attack vulnerability and it's not getting fixed. It's been reported and it's not getting fixed." And then they being Smart Bear, recently added telemetry to Spectral. So if you don't turn it off when you run Spectral rules, it calls home and reports, what's being done. And that was those two things were major concerns. And they said, well, all the Dutch provinces or counties, whatever, different agencies within the Dutch government are now forking it, kind of doing their own thing, doing that selfish thing that I talked about. And so I said, okay, well, sounds like we need to fork it, and I need to be theatrical and kind of drama queen about it as I'm good at. And so I, said, "Hey, I'm forking it. I'm running this." And I've long had this kind of threat that I'm going to fork it and I'm going to call it Spotlight rules because um, if you talk to anybody who's using Spectral rules and using Stoplight, the tool, everyone mistakenly calls it Spotlight, and it's kind of been a slip up. And so I jokingly called the rules and the fork Spotlight as a kind of joke on Swagger, Open API, and that confusion and that whole thing. But it doesn't may not keep the name. It's just kind of my joke right now to be a drama queen and get more attention to it. But bringing it all back to where you're at is it needs a home. This rule set and maybe the tools, the new tool set needs a home. And I don't want to own it. We both have experience managing specs and it sucks. It's a very thankless experience. But I'm happy forking it and kind of putting it onto some sort of foundation, but I need to know what that foundation is. And the first response was, well, we put it in the Open API initiative. You and I both know that's easier said than done. It comes with its own set of problems. So that's one on the table. But then others are like, well, why don't we just put it into the async into the Linux Foundation? Async API did very well going in there, and I said, okay, well that's another option definitely. And then using Open Collective as the kind of the financial vehicle. So we need the IP plus the kind of financial vehicle, but as you said about Open Collective and your experience with Linux Foundation, there's pros and cons to that. And because I would say like my big champion that pushed me into doing this is the Dutch government. And then as soon as I made the theatrical public announcement, the German government reached out to me and said, "Hey, we've also said that this should be used, and we're worried about it now too." So I got two European governments saying we use this specification and it's a concern. So I kind of feel like it shouldn't live in the US, if it's at that level. So, anyways, I'll be quiet and I'd love to hear your thoughts on any of that.
Um, First, let's just make sure I understand. When you say fork, you mean fork the spec and the tool.
I forked excuse me, Spectral CLI, the repo, and I'm now calling it Spotlight Tools. Out of that, there's a single JSON schema configuration in there called Spectral Rule Set and Rules. I've put that into its own repo, and they are separate entities or separate repos with the intent that the rule set should live on its own and be its own conformance suite. And maybe the spec and the tools don't go into the same foundation together because Open API doesn't allow right now to be submitted if that was the option. But that's just one, footnote on this.
So CLI is separate, then the rule sets for a given spec are separate. What about the spec that describes how the rule set should be actually?
That's in the rule set. That's the spec and the
Okay,
rules are the one repo. That's
okay.
because it's meant to. I formalize the JSON schema and I'm working on the kind of conformance language around the spec itself. So the spec and a default set of rules and rule sets live in the one repo together.
Okay. And when we're talking about working it in the right way with the community, we're talking about both CLI and the process.
That's currently yes. They're
Mhm.
both forked, and I have a roadmap for the tool, and I'm calling it Spotlight Tools. So we're not saying CLI because it's got more than just CLI tooling in there. And then I've got a roadmap for the spec itself. And then I've got weekly office hours and community building around both, the conversation around both. And my goal is I'm not making any changes to either without the community kind of being bought in on that, on both of those roadmaps. That's really important, even though I have a whole list of needs that I need done.
Okay. And what about other tools that already adopted the spec, even though the spec was never like officially published, like Vacuum, I think it's the
Yeah.
do you
There's
do
a I have a list published on the site. I've acknowledged them. I've reached out to many of them. There's a different range of attitudes and interests in conformance. I would say Dave and Vacuum. He's forked it. He's got the vacuum rule set. It's in theory backwards compatible. Some folks say it's not. And he's not really interested in anything other than there just being a vacuum rule standard. He said I had him over for a podcast to talk about it last year. And then there's Redockley and Adam and folks over there. They they support the rules. You can import your rule sets. They don't really see, they just see it as a one-way street into their tool set, not as a standard set. And that's kind of pretty common for like Appomatic has the same. You can import spectral rules, but they don't really support configuration of spectral rules and adoption of it as a set of rules. SAP and IBM are the same. You can import and they support it, but it's kind of abstracted away through their own interface. And there's others like Treble and others that and Postman that more openly support it as a rule set and have it so you can import it. But it's always just been kind of a configuration file. It's not a common format, so there's not any my goal is I want to create a conformance suite and kind of and then get tools to start coming back towards the line of it, this being a spec and something they support and something they're conformant to. But that's going to take some work.
yeah. Yeah, so regarding Linux Foundation, I already wrote to you like the problems that I faced when I was an executive director and trying to get funds. So that's so on one side it was really good for us at the very beginning because we were pretty green with Fran. So when we had to like when Fran had to do the donation, um, they came in with like you know like a starters like with a charter template, some know-how that we could reuse to kickstart. But we didn't, we took it as a template, but we never followed their best practices when it comes to setup of the project because, you know, Linux Foundation is usually member projects, member companies. So like in Open API, you just have in the end, in business government governance, you have representatives of some companies that are members. The same with GraphQL, the same with any other Linux Foundation project. Unless you are like us, we're not the only ones. There are a few other projects I know from the past that joined Linux Foundation, but from day one we said we just want the intellectual property and trademark to be secured by Linux Foundation. But the rest we're doing on our own. So they basically said like you have to do a open governance and but you do it the way if you want to do it as you if you come up like basically with an open governance model that is not standard in Linux Foundation, that's all fine. So they just they really when we wrote the first charter, they participated in review, but I mean, they didn't enforce anything. They even suggested that for first few years, we have an executive director. Then so Fran was an executive director that had this right to veto any change. We never, of course, we never exercised that right when I was executive director as well. But even them, they said like, okay, you set up governance model, but it's a startup phase. You need few years to have this role of someone who can actually block changes if they are not really um, done properly. So like if there are basically gaps in the governance that somebody tries to use against community. Um, and then after the startup period, that's why I started working on a governance model without executive director. Now that's why we have board. So that's the Linux Foundation. So at the very beginning, they were pretty useful. Also, their events team was helping us with the online events first 2 years, I think. And even though they said they will charge us, they never actually charged any money from us. So that was good. But yeah, we lost a lot of money from like I can tell you like one of the sponsors that is on the website yet, uh, but we will remove the sponsor soon. Said they will not renew because Linux Foundation. So there's a pros and cons.
Yeah.
Um, Open API, I think you know more than I know. We also didn't want to join them, so I guess I would not recommend. Um, I recommend separate organization, but again, it's really important to understand what foundation is really giving you. Because so Linux Foundation just gave us IP and trademark protection. But the reality is that it's really basic protection. So that's something I'm now gonna be implementing for open source Europe. And actually the IP and trademark protection works on a let's say basic level. So when somebody, let's say, uses trademark, let's say I don't know, Amazon is using async API and calling some product async API, which is like reusing our trademark to actually sell, and we don't like it. And we would go to Linux Foundation. Linux Foundation would for free send a letter to like signed by lawyers to Amazon to tell them like they should not use it. It's trademark protected. Um, but that's it. So if there would be they would not listen, and we would have to go to court. We have to have budget as a project to actually pay for lawyers, which is I don't think it's possible, especially in US, as far as I know. So that's really what the IP protection is. It's a really basic, but later you really need money to fight with giants, and it's on you. Linux Foundation will not sponsor that. Also, Linux Foundation does not sponsor any coding work, so that's why we had to have open source collective, so we can collect money because we didn't have entities, so they're basically a representative. So cool thing was, for example, that Tuli, we can pay her and to protect her in a way that she knows that she has budget for next year, and it's not just our words that confirm it. So open source collective foundation could sign on our behalf a contract with Tuli um, for the community work. So that was also like a feature from open source collective. But that's it. So you're really at the end on your own when it comes to governance. It's you and your community that have to set it up. You have to agree how you want to do it. There's a lot of governance models out there you can pick, but not a single foundation that will enforce it on you except of Apache Foundation. So Apache Foundation have this PCM approach that every single repo has PCMs. They have this like the whole standard approach on structuring projects. You have to name it Apache, so it's like a Apache Spectral or Apache Spotlight or whatever. You have project committer, commit member, something PCM. That's what I think it means, project commit member or committer member. So they tell you how to govern the project, but they're the worst if it comes to collecting money. Because if you want to collect money and do some work basing on money from the community, you cannot have your project, you cannot use the brand anymore. So they, for example, I know the guy that is actually in the board of Apache Foundation. He's also PCM of one of the Apache projects, and he has an open source Europe collective in open source Europe that he couldn't call by the name of this Apache project that he's actually one of the main core maintainers. They did not allow him to use the name of the project. So he has to use different name, which sucks. And last but not least is Eclipse Foundation that is still operating. It's I think it's, as far as I know, it's registered in Canada. They in the end they wanted to escape from US, but as far as I know, they in the end they evaluated Belgium and Canada and they chose Canada. But they are really nice because they, for example, recently started cooperating with Open Source Europe because they want to allow their Eclipse projects to collect money officially under their names. So we even we're kicking off a project, related project. So in the end, it all depends really who's the funding members of your project. So if like a majority of the funding members will be people from Europe, then might be that for them it's important that it's a project that is under Open Source Europe, for example, um, or at least Eclipse Foundation. So that's really the questions you should ask first to the community, to people that would like to be funding members. What's critical for them? Because if critical is just the like I'm rambling a bit, but let's go back again into the past of Async API. Async API was donated by Fran to Linux Foundation few years after we already used Open Source Collective. Because again, Open Source Collective is just for collecting money and was just for collecting money. And then after a few years of Fran collecting money and using them, Microsoft and some others came in and said, like, you have to donate it to a foundation. And donated was basically they wanted to make sure that the IP and trademark does not belong to Fran, but to a foundation. So it's kind of protected that Fran one day will not take the brand, basically. So again, it's this is what is the most important, like funding members. Are they interested with the IP and trademark? Are they just or are they just interested with making sure that it's openly governed? Because you can have open governance without foundation. It's again, it's a community work. You decide how you run things, how you govern things in the project. You don't need foundation for it. Foundation is needed when you actually need IP protection, you need fiscal hosting, you need some other
Yeah.
features from it.
Yeah. No, thanks for that. And that's everything I was looking for. I would say um, there's the aspect of IP and governance and fiscal. That's, I would say, a D, the all the above is building that trust that enough that people will continue investing it, continue using it. Which is part of like, SAP, IBM, others using it and trusting it because it's in a foundation. But there's also getting people who are just on the current spectral rule set switching. And why is this better? Why is this more on a solid foundation? And then there's I have Phil and others, but most notably Phil Sturgeon, who created Specky, originally created and then moved it into Stop or Spectral, and is now wanting to take a leadership role I need to pay him. I need to take money and actually pay Phil to help me manage it, and then hopefully find someone to be a community person like you mentioned. And so I need to pay people to kind of move it forward. So it's kind of all the above, and then the the people who are most interested in it and being part of it being forged, I would say majority are European. And there's a lot of the sentiment right now that you shared earlier about why open source Europe exists. So I think you kind of covered everything, and it's kind of now up to the community on where it should live. Now, everything you just said also for me, I would say applies to APIs JSON for me. My spec as well is like I'm in that state where that Fran was when I first met him and you first came on board was it's mine, it's my baby, but it's now starting to get wider usage, wider adoption, and I don't want to own it and maintain it, and there's concern around it. So there's two specs I would say on the table here, and there's actually multiple specs within the API's JSON umbrella. There's a licensing, there's rate limits, there's several modular specs that are part of it as well. So um, back to Spectral though, or Spotlight, whatever we're working on the name right now, whatever the name of it becomes, we'll just call it Spotlight right now. Um, what would be the next steps that I could tell everybody as far as open source Europe? What would the roadmap or the onboarding process look like if we did move down this road?
With Open Source Europe, it's easy. You just go to opencollective.com, you create a new collective with the name of the project, and then you
Okay.
apply for Open Source Europe.
Okay.
And I'm the one that is accepting, so
Oh, okay.
that's the easy path. Um, and then once we accept, we have an onboarding, but onboarding is rather like teaching you how to use the platform, like how the expenses work, how who should be like that you should have admins, somebody has to like like how the whole radical transparency approach we follow as well
Oh,
in Open Collective platform. But then of course you have me. So whenever you want to get some idea, um, ask for anything, you can
yeah.
always
Okay.
reach to me so I can
Appreciate
help.
that.
Um, and yeah, like I mean, I'm of course not how much doesn't matter how much I try, I'm not going to be always objective here, like because I'm now
Mm,
in Open Source Europe. But yes, like if Dutch government and German government would plan to donate, or they will like, because I'm not sure if you're aware of Sovereign Tech Fund
yeah.
from Germany, if they
Yeah.
will, for example, say like, hey, so Sovereign Tech Fund should maybe pay Phil to work on Spectral, then for sure it makes difference for European governments that they
Yeah.
pay money in Europe,
Yeah.
not outside. And the good thing is you also can apply for, we support applying for grants to European Union.
Yeah.
So whenever you need to apply for a grant, we can help out and can be like partners of a consortium that make it easier to apply and get
Nice.
accepted.
Well, that's huge. That's super important. That's another nice to have. I also have the Italian government. I'm talking to them. I haven't had them. They're using Spectral, and they've done the federated model where they created a central rule set of tools, and they've told different groups to use it. And I'm actually um, I have a tool that evaluates people's GitHub actions and how they use Spectral and then make recommendations. Adding OWASP is like the next because most people just use the baseline Spectral rules for OpenAPI and they don't use the OWASP. And so I submit a pull request or an issue saying, hey, you should upgrade your pipeline to be what's next level secure. And I submitted that to the Italian government on their central one, and they said, "Hey, submit the pull request. That'd be great." And I'm talking to them, and so they would be a third. I think that would be a kind of a cornerstone. That this, a pretty big boat. That this should be something that's European. I think it'd be pretty critical. So
Yeah. And so our service is already fiscal hosting and official and grants. IP and trademark that's in progress. So, but yeah, I can prioritize more if that's a deal breaker, and you can be the first one that will be protected like this. But but I think it's not. I think the most important that you really need is an open governance and actual move and some announcement, and that's it.
Yeah. Well, we're on,
Um,
I'm on the slow path. We're not in any hurry here. I mean, we are to a certain degree to get, I think, something that's usable that the core group can start building and moving towards, but we got to decide a name. We got to decide a home. So like, and the name's got to come before the home. Like you said, we need to set up the open collective. And so, and I've been just kind of doing weekly conversations and building consensus among a core group every Friday. And so I'll take this to everyone tomorrow and let them know. And I'm pretty sure that there's going to be a lot of interest in this as a path. So
and be careful with the naming, because it sounds like your name will be super similar and kind of
yeah,
relate.
no, and yeah. And so
But
I think it's got to be something entirely different, something
yeah,
that's not gonna strike any issues.
yeah, because you probably remember Postman, Postwoman, and
Yeah,
then this was
hopscotch had to go to hopscotch. Yeah, yeah,
yeah. So
yeah.
I'm
And
I'm pretty sure they
swag,
had to do it because of lawyers.
yes, and Swagger and Open API. I was part of all of that as well. So yeah, the name is a super critical one, and as much as I would love my joke to land and continue, I also don't want to be sued and have just problems. So I'd rather the spec live on. So um,
Open
do
rule
you
set, because everybody likes open now. So
open
everybody's open rule set.
sovereign rule set?
Oh yeah.
There you go. Um, so wait, and yeah, and what it is it a rules? Is rules the thing? We might be looking at policy. There's other kind of ways of approaching it. So this is the first and most important conversation I think that's on the table right now is the naming of it. So um, with that said, would you mind if I made this video public and shared with the group? Anything said in here that you'd be concerned about sharing?
No, I mean, if you
Okay.
don't mind that I was implying something about US, that's fine.
No, no. I mean, I mean, you and I both come from this radical transparency kind of
Yeah.
perspective. So I know generally you and I are in agreement. I always want to ask. I did ask to record it. I want to be explicit. So I'm going to publish it as just an API evangelist conversation, which is my podcast, but they're just conversations. Because after doing breaking changes at Postman and I'm all about low production quality. I'm not about high production because that was a nightmare. So what I'll do is I'll publish it and then I'll share it with the core group, which is about like 15, 20 people right now. And then I'd like to talk about it publicly too, because I think the Open Source Europe, the Linux Foundation, there's the sovereign stuff, there's a lot of conversation, intersection of a lot of conversations I'm having. Viability of commercial open source is a really important one right now that I'm having with several folks in the light of AI. How do we make money? And then the sovereign piece is a super important one. So I think open source Europe is an important thread to have out there. So I'd like to talk about it wider. So if you're cool, I'll publish.
Sure. Dude.
Great. Um, I know where to find you. I know, and I look forward to maybe, I'm guessing I might see you maybe in Paris this year. You think you'll be in Paris?
Still to be decided. Let's see.
Okay.
Let's see.
Well, we're having Mehdi's doing the API gathering. So we're getting the Dutch government, the German government are committed, the French government. I'm working on the Italian government and some other folks are working on Spanish. And so it's we're attempting to recreate what we did in I think it was 2017 when the European Commission actually brought us all together. Medi, me, and all the member states came together. We're looking to do it as the third day for API days. And so it might be even if you're not there, but I would love for Open Source Europe to maybe have be part of the conversation if everyone's going to be there. So I'll keep you in tune though.
But you're planning it ready for Paris this year?
Yeah, it's let me Europe. So europeapi.com is it's already, I'll put it in chat, but it's pretty easy. Europeapi.com. It's already planned. And it's the last day after API Days Paris. And it's just all the government entities coming together, and we're working on it now. So you should come and speak. You should talk to Mehdi. Happy to introduce you, but I think you know the channels. So,
Yeah. Um,
so you should talk
good.
to Mehdi and see if Open Source Europe can get a slot.
Yeah, it's definitely um, a good argument for me to go to Paris.
Seems like a fit to me just by the name there and the names of what you're doing and what they're doing. So yeah, so I already got the Dutch and German government committed. Manny's working on the French and I'm working on the Italian. So and we'll see who else. The UK's not really Europe, but yeah, we'll see what we can get there too. So all
Yeah.
right.
And I think I'm gonna because I have a contact with a with one person that is doing the open source and it's in the Polish government. So
Yeah,
I can
please.
also drop them this link as well.
Yeah, and tell them and just CC Mehdi, get Mehdi talking to him and get them invited. So
Okay. Okay. I will.
thanks. You rock. Appreciate your time, my friend. Good to see you.
No worries. So hopefully see you in Paris.
All right. Thanks. Talk to you later.